Hello again. This is Josh Carr at The Real Angle, and today I'm speaking with Brian Adams, principal at Family Office Executive Search. Um, Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining. It's always good to expand the network and to talk about subjects that are near and dear to my heart. One of which is family office stuff, and the other which is the executive recruiting process. So let's talk about, I guess, the first thing, which is job switch. You were in the family office space. What are you doing now?
Yeah, so um, for 10 years I was doing commercial real estate. I was a sponsor and a GP doing syndication work for the most part. And I guess as a bit of a background, we kind of talked before we went live, but my folks are from New Jersey. I grew up in upstate New York, but my wife is from Nashville. We met in school and moved down here about 15 years ago to Tennessee. My wife's family has a family office here. She's the oldest member of G2. And so I've known about that world for a while through my wife and her kind of family connections, and always thought it was a fascinating world. Um,
Hmm.
a confluence of events happened, which is kind of a longer story, but I was looking to maybe do something different after doing real estate for 10, 11 years and had the opportunity to join the best retained search executive staffing firm for family offices in the country. A woman named Linda Mack started it 25 years ago. And so combining all of my skills and knowledge of content marketing, of family office,
Right.
I love networking and just had built a lot of relationships in that world. Um, it just was too good of an opportunity to pass on. So as of January, I'm a principal and a partner with the firm, and it's been great so far. We're really busy, and it's been a lot of fun. It's very different than what I was doing before, though. Absolutely.
So I guess I want to attack this from a couple angles. I guess the first thing is, I said you were in the family office space. It sounds like you're still very much in the family office space, just not at a family office.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I'm a non-lineal member of my wife's family. So I'm on the board. I'm an ex officio member. So I don't have voting rights per se, but observation rights certainly, and was pretty involved back when we had more of a complex structure. Um,
And I just want to explain what that means. I mean, when you say non-lineal in plain English
yeah.
for everybody else,
Married in.
you're not blood. You're married into it.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not
You're
a
there.
direct beneficiary. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it's funny for those people who are new to the family office space. When they say family office, the emphasis is on the word family.
Yeah.
And blood is thicker than water, and all those cliches people like to throw out there. Um, and that's something that first interested me when you and I first connected about family office space a few months ago. Before when we were first talking about getting on the line here, is I just found it interesting that you were working in a relatively senior position at a family office, but you were not blood. You were married into it. So I'm just curious how that came about. I mean, so you marry this girl, you decide to build a life with someone, and then what were you doing before you started working at the family office?
I was an attorney.
Okay.
So I practiced law, and actually, in our family, no family members work in the family office. We all have day jobs. So we
Okay.
have non-family members who kind of run it, but the culture and the expectation is that you have a professional life outside of that.
Sure.
And so nobody really works for the family office directly. We certainly have board positions and ad hoc projects and things that we're working on, but we have non-family member executive folks.
Got it. Got it. Which then I guess builds into what you're doing now, which is executive search for family office positions.
Yeah, large families will hire us on a retained basis to help them find CEO, presidents, chief investment officers, chief financial officers, general counsels, all kind of C-suite executives for the most part across the country. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, same world, different side of the table for sure.
So I guess I'm curious. I mean, you were doing stuff in the real estate space because, again, I guess the family office you were at had a lot of real estate, which is why I imagine you were in the real estate space. Not to put words in your mouth, but that's my guess. Um, Obviously, family offices can do all kinds of things, not just real estate. I mean, it runs the gamut here. Um, what is different about hiring for those positions at a family office versus, say, any other kind of recruitment job? I mean, finance people get recruited for finance jobs all the time. So, how is this different?
Right. Well, there's the technical skill set, which you alluded to, which is you have to have the ability to kind of do the job, the scope of a chief financial officer or a chief executive officer, et cetera. You're right. I mean, the technical skill side is for the most part interchangeable with working at a private equity firm or an asset manager or an alternatives platform. What the hard part is, and where we really have identified our niche, is finding somebody with the soft skills and the EQ, the emotional abilities to work within a family construct, right? So even though functionally the investments might be the same as a private equity firm, your clients are not. Your clients are not institutional investors. Your clients are family members.
Right.
And to be able to serve them efficiently and have the empathy towards them, and also invariably you have three different jobs. You will bleed into being the chief therapist and the
Right.
chief troubleshooter and fixer. What we say is, if it's important to the family, it's important to you. And so you
Sure.
really need to identify somebody that has that service mindset and that client serving mindset. And not everybody does, right? It's not everybody's cup of tea to allocate to private equity firms, but then also handle prenups or other kind of domestic issues that would be outside of a lot of folks' mandate on
Sure.
the private side. Yeah,
Yeah, and they don't just have investment real estate, for example, they have personal real estate. And
correct,
sometimes I know a colleague of mine who works at a family office found himself dragged into managing contractors on some private residential stuff because they were like, well, you understand construction.
correct.
Why don't you assist us on the fact that we're adding a wing to the mansion? And these,
Yeah,
and on one hand, I can understand a traditional commercial real estate guy saying, well, that's not what I do. But, well, you do now. You're at a family office. So
correct, exactly.
yeah, no, and it's funny. I had a amusing conversation with a colleague of mine who works at a large bank in a finance job, and he referred to someone as being a quote very nice person, which was his way. It's kind of like the way Southerners will sometimes say "bless your heart." Finance. If someone
kiss,
says you're a very nice person, that's
kiss
code
of
for
death. Yeah.
yeah, you're a moron, basically. And I called him on it because we were at a social event and we were like the two finance guys in the room. And I said, I know what you're saying. He goes, yeah, the guy's a bleeping moron. And I said, yeah, okay. You don't have to
Yeah.
pull punches with me. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's just not, you know, it's not for everybody.
Sure.
And the other kind of issue is most people who are hiring into a C suite position like that, they want somebody with family office experience.
Okay. Makes sense.
And so for us, we have the best database and directory of family office executives in the country. So for us to have the ability to call people directly who have that type of experience and track record is much more different than a recruiter that focuses on private equity that happens to come across a family office mandate. I mean, this is all we do all day, every day.
Now, let me understand something from a growth path, compensation path standpoint, right? If I'm working at a Blackstone in PE or I'm working in banking at a JP Morgan Chase or something, I think we understand what that comp looks like. There's salary, there's holiday bonus, and there's stock or maybe participations in deals or something like that if you're more a PE shop. Um, and you have titles and ranks and people move up the food chain and this sort of thing. But at a family office, if it's a small managing a lot of money but a small head count, It's not like you have a clear evolutionary path. And I'd also throw out there before I really ask my question, if you're asking someone who's already a family office to go work at another family office, like what's the motivation? I mean, other than just simply, well, they'll give you more money. Like
Yeah.
what's kind of what's all that look like for these people?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, the appealing component to work for a family these days is the stability, compared to a shop
Sure.
on Wall Street, right? I mean, this morning I had a call with somebody who told me that, Goldman Sachs is really skinnying up their investment banking team and everyone's jumping shop to go to Morgan Stanley. The names are irrelevant, but every 3 to 5 years this happens, right? There's just turnover and everyone's running around. Um, for a family that has a stable capital base and patient capital, the ability to not have to worry about the machinations of the daily market is really attractive to a lot of people. And
Sure.
if you can deploy capital across a 25, 50-year time horizon and not have to go out and raise third party capital, I mean, some families do club up, but that can be really enticing for a lot of people that are tired of the rat race of every day having to, go out there and win business. So there's that component to it. The other side is to your kind of second question. These are very sought after positions these days. Family offices have become their own asset class and really their own industry. They become professionalized and institutionalized for the most part. The challenge is that if you have a C-suite position, compensation is typically really strong. You can participate alongside the family in private investments.
Sure.
Many times there's a long-term incentive plan, um, and the ability to pull down on a line of credit to participate in those private offerings that otherwise you wouldn't be able to because you're
Very
not a qualified
attractive.
purchaser or whatever.
Right. Right.
So the challenge is that if you're the CEO of a large family office, you're probably going to stay there for 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, you could run your
So
whole career there in theory. Yeah,
right, so if
sure.
you're a up and coming professional within that structure, there's really nowhere for you to go up. There's
Right.
not a huge amount of turnover. Like MDs at Goldman are retiring all the time, right?
Sure.
But
They make their nut and then they go do something else. Yeah.
these folks tend to stick around. So you've got to move laterally to go up oftentimes. And so that's where we come in to help find you your dream job. And we know about these mandates because, as you can imagine, it's a very confidential, discreet business.
Sure.
Um, and so, we have the ability to help find really, really great up and coming talent that otherwise, the family wouldn't be able to.
No, it's funny. I no, everything you're saying rings true. I mean, I've kidded around. The thing about these guys hopping ship. I mean, I've kidded around that finance professionals or bankers specifically are the highest paid migrant labor force in the world. The strawberry picking season is good and they're in, and then picking season is out and they bail. And allegiance to the firm. What are you talking about? There is no allegiance. It's a
Yeah.
check and stock, and that's that. Um, no, it's interesting. And your other point about how they're not advertising broadly also makes sense to me because having worked with some family office folk, they're quiet and they like it that way. I mean, they don't need to be on billboards. They have their money, they're putting it to work, and you know, it does not benefit them for, every Tom, Dick, and Harry to know who they are and how much they're worth because why would they?
Yeah,
So,
they're getting pitched constantly, right? They're getting inbounded all the time. People think they're this magic key to capital raising. And so um, to have somebody kind of act on as a proxy on their behalf to the market is very attractive for many of them. And
right.
all day, every day, I'm having calls with candidates and family members. And we're in the market. We're working 5 mandates right now. So it's just very efficient. I think one of the challenges for families of this kind of scale is the efficiency of their time. And what we often see is they'll go out to their social network or their professional network and they'll talk to some people who are smart, have the technical ability, but they won't have fully vetted them. And there's the disconnect between expectations and reality. And so when they bring that friend in, or that, you know, tennis buddy from their club,
Sure.
and they come from JP Morgan, they realize, gosh, like I'm also having to deal with all these other things that we covered earlier in this conversation. This is not a good fit for me. I'm leaving in 6 months. That family now has to go back to the market. And with us, it takes 5 months. It's a lot of work, but we
Sure.
get you the right candidate. If you do it the other way, it's 12 to 18, and it just takes a lot of your time. And the biggest rate limiting factor you have is your time.
It's time. No, and your point about the person, it really does speak to the personality type. Your comment about having a sense of service, if you will. And I mean, not to besmirch a group of people, but when I think about finance professionals and PE, service is usually not why they got into that line of work.
Right.
If they do charitable stuff. It's, in my experience, and again, I'm being a horrible cynic, I often find it's a very self-promoting type of charity service. It's buying a table so they can be called a humanitarian, but do they actually care about the, soup kitchen or what have you? Not that much. Again, maybe I'm a cynic here. So I do, it is interesting to me that you're looking for people with a very specialized set of skills, but also a personality type that fits in with a broader mandate of helping others.
Yeah.
So,
And what we often say is we're looking for the expert generalist, right? So
mm,
these families have terrific third party vendors and service providers,
sure.
best in class law firms and bankers, and
They can pay for it. They're big name. They got a lot of money. Sure.
but they need somebody to coordinate amongst all of them, right? So this person typically needs to know a little bit about trust and estates, insurance, risk management, deal making, investments, operations, etc. down the line. Um, and nowadays, within the white collar financial services world, the specification is very intense oftentimes. And so when
Right.
you become siloed as an M&A credit analyst, like that's all you do,
Sure.
you're not really well suited to come in as a generalist to these families. So it takes the right type of person who has the right background in order to be successful in these roles, and they can be hard to find.
No, I hear you. I mean, I run my own business, and
Yeah,
I know a lot about setting up phone systems and email servers. I did not go to school for that, but if you're setting up a small business, that becomes part of the conversation.
totally.
You need to rent office space. You need to buy furniture. I mean, you need to do all that jazz, which you can't have an attitude of it's beneath you or something. Um,
Right.
Now, here's one question I have because you hit on it and then we sort of skipped it, but I do want to circle back. Um, you mentioned that family offices have really become their own asset class, and I agree with that statement. They definitely are a larger part of the financial landscape than they were, say, when I entered industry. And I'm 49. I'm turning 50 in a month. So I've been around for a bit. Um, why? Why do you think family offices are now having their place in the sun, if you will, versus 30 years ago? Why do you think that's changed?
I think one aspect is the financial regulatory environment. Um, you know, Not everybody wants to be a regulated entity these days.
Sure.
And so a lot of folks who are in financial services, be it real estate, hedge fund, asset management, that outside capital and LPs, there's been a lot of volatility in the last 20 years, from a market perspective, but also from a legal landscape perspective. And
Right.
I think it comes to people who want control, confidentiality, and a higher level of service. And those are
Right.
the three kind of main drivers. And oftentimes even the big concierge banks, and the really discreet boutique multifamily offices, they just don't have the ability to handle estate management, airplane management, investments, asset management,
Right.
cash forecasting, go down the line. Not everybody can be really good at that. And
Sure.
so if you're comfortable with it being kind of a net neutral cost center, you can provide your own boutique wealth management firm for your own beneficiaries. And that's just become really attractive for a lot of people. And I think not many people knew it was even an option, honestly, until 10 or 20 years ago. And they've
Sure.
started realizing that, they could do this themselves. and achieve those big three drivers, control, confidentiality, and a higher level of service.
No, and that's those are all excellent points. I mean, the technology has evolved to a place also now where, it does you do not need to be a bulge bracket bank to, have a digital dashboard that tells you where all your money is. Like,
Yeah.
technology has evolved. You can have service providers all over the place and you can do that too. Yeah, no, it's
And
interesting.
there's just been some big exits too. I mean, you think about what the market's done the last 20 years,
Sure.
there's been some big realization events.
Mhm. Mhm. A lot of tech guys made an obscene amount of money, and now they're sitting on this huge pile, and they're saying to themselves, "Why should I give Goldman this pile and pay him a management fee from here until the end of time, when I could just hire a few guys and rent some space and probably get the same returns I would have gotten if I put it with them?" So, plus, as you said, the benefit of confidentiality and control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me the first when people make a lot of money, the bragging to their friends is immediately followed by not wanting to anyone to know. That often they realize that the bragging may feed your lizard brain, but it doesn't actually service you in the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting. Um, so it's curious. So let's talk a little bit about sort of where the family office space goes over the next few years. I mean, evolution continues. Um, you're at a search firm, so what do you see for the next, 5, 10 years? What do you think the trajectories are of these things? And also, I wanted to ask you this because you did come from the family office space more directly as a manager of one.
Yeah. I think a couple of big trends and themes that you'll see play out here over the next, call it 5 or 10 years. One would be this leadership transition from baby boomer to the next generation, be it Gen X, millennial, Gen Z.
Sure.
It was much discussed and it's now happening, right? I think the average baby boomer is now 67.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say once a week we get inbounded by a family who their leadership, be it a family member or a non-family executive, is 70 years old. They're retiring. They want to take a step back. They want to go to, emeritus position, and
Sure.
they need to hire somebody to take their spot. But they've been in that position for 20 or 30 years. Can we help them? Like that's a
Right.
very common inbound we get, and
Interesting.
that's just demographics. That will continue
Sure.
to occur. There just aren't enough professionals to be able to step into those roles. And kind of like we talked about, the dynamic a lot of these families is they tend to have very weak bench depth, right? They've got some really, really good executive folks and then a lot of really hungry worker bees that get good experience, but that mid tier can be very difficult to maintain. And so they tend to kind of need folks like us to help them backfill those positions. Um, the other kind of big trend we're seeing more and more of is maybe larger families splitting off their branches.
Okay.
So maybe a next gen no longer wants to be a part of this larger corpus, and they want to have their own family office.
Makes sense.
Um, and that's kind of part and parcel with the comment I made earlier about this generational shift occurring. Um, there hasn't been as many de novo family office creation just because the capital markets have been fairly subdued. I think if rates continue to go down and the IPO market opens and there's more liquidity events, obviously you'll see more starting. There is still a bit of an overhang from the manic period of COVID where we're starting to see some folks slow down and realize, okay, I had this event or I've got this capital. Let's go ahead and start doing this when things are a little bit quieter. So I'd say it's mostly multi generational families, but we do have some kind of de novo families as well. Um,
Interesting.
so you'll see that come back if the market comes back for sure.
No, it's funny. I never really, I guess you said a couple of things that I never really thought about. One is that there's a direct relationship between these big capital events like a hot IPO market and the creation of these things, which is not something that I really
Oh yeah, it's a direct
thought about,
correlation for sure. Yeah.
but it makes sense because large checks. And your point about the bench depth is interesting to me too. I have a colleague of mine who is sort of was going to be the heir apparent to take over running one of these things. Um, and he was there for about 10 years. And then the senior person just wouldn't retire, and eventually he
Yeah.
just said, you know what? I'm going somewhere else. I can't, not to be grim here, but it's like, I can't wait for you to die. You seem like you're in good health and you seem to
Well,
have no interest in retiring. So when I put those two statements together, you know, at a certain point, I need to move on with my day.
and part of the challenge too is because of modern medicine and
Sure.
just the advance of technology, people are just living longer than we anticipated, right? When these things were set
Yes.
up, and you were 40 years old and you're the CEO, you think, oh, well, I'll do this for 20, 25 years and then call it. But then you realize, well, I'm 65 and I can do this for another 20 years. That's a 40-year run. And a lot of younger people behind you are saying, like, I've been waiting for 10 years I mean, this isn't happening anytime soon.
Sure.
These people are working well into their 80s now. And that's really created a cram down effect for a lot of younger talent.
My father-in-law retired recently, and I don't understand why he did. But by that I mean I understand why he retired because he wanted to spend more time with the kids and the grandkids and that stuff. But from a physical standpoint, there was nothing stopping him. He could have kept working. He's in great health. He looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, his father passed away early, but he didn't, and he's still there. And so I think it's that interesting sort of we all had the mindset of you got a six on your age, and you said, well, I should think about retiring to the beach, but yet you're still somehow pulling 60-hour weeks because you like what you do and you don't want to stop. So
And with
yeah,
technology, there's a huge amount of flexibility occurring in terms of in the office versus not. And
sure.
maybe you can dial it back a couple times a year and still be kind of working. That's the other kind of piece that I would say is there definitely is a migration occurring in terms of the activity in Texas and Florida and the Southeast
Hmm.
is much more significant than elsewhere. I mean, New York will always be kind of the finance hub, and there's a
Sure.
huge amount of talent there. But we are seeing just a huge amount of activity in the Sun Belt for sure.
And that's because that's where people retired. So that's what the family offices are running out of, you're saying?
Tax refugees. I mean, people,
Okay.
no longer
Sure.
want to be in New York or New Jersey or
I,
Connecticut
I get
for
it. I get it.
obvious reasons, and it just depends. But that is certainly something that we've seen an uptick on for
No,
sure.
I live in New Jersey, and every time I think about my taxes, I say to myself, "Well, at least I'm not in New York." So
Yeah, exactly.
it's all relative, I guess. But by that logic, at some point, I should just pick up my marbles and you know go somewhere else.
Yeah,
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, and that's something where I mean we have some of our listeners from other markets like outside of the United States, and I've taught at Columbia for like 20 plus years, and half our students are foreign nationals. And the thing that the foreign kids never can get through their thick heads is that when we say that we have 50 different states, that means we really have 50 different governments with 50 different bodies of law, and each state kind of does its own thing, and so be it. Uh, you know, Whereas if you're coming from France, you're like, but we're French. That's it. Like, there's
yeah,
no, they don't, the idea that one state could refuse to extradite to another state is not something that they can wrap their brains around. Like,
yeah.
we're our own thing. It's curious. It's curious. Well, no, this has been interesting. It's been fun. Again, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was because you're coming to the family office conversation both from an operator and also from now the recruitment side. Um, so that's curious to say the least. Um, by the way, and one thing I always like to throw out there, which I didn't, I always put out the website. It's Mack International, MACK International.com. I forgot to mention
Correct.
that at the
Yeah.
beginning of our thing. I always put that out there because when I don't, I invariably get emails to be like,
Yeah, I appreciate it. And also, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so just look me up, shoot me a note. I'm happy to
link,
chat.
link, LinkedIn is
Yeah.
awesome. Um, cool. Well, look, I've gone through my questions. Anything I missed? Anything else we want to get out there?
No, I think you covered the waterfront. I mean, it's an interesting time. I will say, generally speaking, compensation's going up.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's good and bad, but I think that's just kind of where we are, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And so people just need to get comfortable with that. Now, families have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they structure these comp packages, but
Sure.
generally speaking, it's going up.
I think the interesting part about this too is the multi-year aspect of it. I find fascinating. I mean, I coming from a more traditional finance world of it's all about bonus season, and let's see how bonus season is, and if my bonus isn't good, then screw these guys. That's a very different mindset than the multi-year. We're engaged with you, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think there is something to the idea that you have family as clients is just really attractive to people after, if you did the Wall Street thing for a long time and it blows up every 3 to 5 years. I think there's just something really appealing to knowing your clients that well,
Sure,
for a
sure.
lot of people. And there's something to that.
Hey, I
So,
spend more time with the people I work with than I do my wife and kids, and
yeah.
that's not I'm a bad parent or spouse. It's just look at the hours. I mean, just in practice, I'm here more than I am there. Or when I'm there, it's more mundane tasks.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's curious stuff. Well, cool. Look, this has been very interesting. I'm glad we got you on, and obviously, I wish you luck with your new endeavors. And in a lot of ways, I'm glad we took a few months to finally record this because originally we were just going to talk family office stuff. Now we got to talk family office and recruiting stuff. So,
Yeah. It's a very niche business. So I think I'm the only person under 50 doing it really in
I
America. So,
I love niche stuff. If you look at the
yeah.
history of people I've interviewed, it's always I want it weird. I don't want another guy who just buys apartment buildings and fixes the kitchens and bathrooms. Not no knock on that. I've done that, but like there are a lot of people who do that. So
Yeah.
cool. Well,
Understood.
thanks again, and again for that was Brian Adams, Mack International, and again got the website up there, and he's active on LinkedIn. Thanks again, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.